Hey everybody, it's me Lone. I hope you're doing alright. We are back to talk about Borderlands. It's been a good minute since I've talked about the Borderlands franchise on this channel, and there is no better time than when there's potentially Borderlands 4 and also Tiny Tina's Wonderlands 2 rumors and leaks going about. So I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know in today's video. All sources are linked in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you are new. But what are we talking about? Well, it all goes back to somebody's LinkedIn profile. It always seems to be a developer's LinkedIn profile. They just like to include unannounced titles referenced on their LinkedIn profile. And it doesn't make sense because it's against NDA. Please don't include references to unannounced titles on your LinkedIn profile because you're going to get a bunch of news articles and YouTube videos about it. But now, cat's out of the bag. It's out in the open. We're going to be talking about it. I won't mention this developer's name, but they used to work at Lost Boys Interactive, who is a studio that actually supports Gearbox. They supported Gearbox on the first Wonderlands game, and apparently they're supporting Gearbox right now on Borderlands 4 and Wonderlands 2. So in the words of this particular developer, they said they were supervising a team of 66 employees to, quote, plan and engineer development on Borderlands 4 on Unreal Engine 4 or UE4, and also Tiny Tina's Wonderlands 2 on UE4 as well. So that's where this rumor and potential leak all started, and I do feel bad for the particular developer, but it's not like Randy hasn't already teased both titles anyways. So let's talk about that, right? Yeah, this isn't a surprise. This is not a surprise. Even just look at Borderlands, right? Borderlands, massive franchise. We all know Borderlands 3 sold beyond expectations. It sold over 18 million copies by 2023, and that's still counting. And it's 2K's fastest selling title ever in their publishing history. That is actually insane. And as I mentioned, Randy Pitchford has always teased stuff, and he's teased Borderlands 4 when he said that they were working on the big one in a tweet. I think he later clarified that people misunderstood him, but it's obvious they're working on Borderlands 4, let's be real. You don't have a huge success like Borderlands 3 and say, all right, pack it up, we're done with the franchise. Especially when you have Wonderlands 1, which also shattered their targets and was a surprise hit. I absolutely loved Wonderlands. I thought it was fantastic, and it absolutely needs to serve the basis of a spin-off franchise for the Borderlands series. And even Randy Pitchford said, quote, we now clearly have a new franchise on our hands with future experiences already development at Gearbox. So he said there are future experiences already development at the studio. We're going to get Borderlands 4, we're going to get Wonderlands 2. So yeah, I don't feel so bad for the developer because they've kind of said something that we already knew was coming, right? It wasn't like a title that was completely unannounced that came as a shock to everybody. So let's just take this at face value, and as always, it's still a leak, it's still a rumor, take it with a grain of salt. But at face value, let's ask the question, when could we see Borderlands 4? Let's put aside Wonderlands 2 because it's probably going to come after Borderlands 4, and therefore it would depend on when Borderlands 4 is released. So let's ask the question, when could we see Borderlands 4? Is there a chance that it's actually released next year in 2024? I think it's a possibility, and I think it's a possibility we might see a tease or announcement at the Game Awards this year in December, and especially because Borderlands 3 released on 13th September 2019, which was over 4 years ago, right? So it's been a while, and if it was to release again in September of next year, that's 5 years of development. So that's a long time, and I would say that's a decent length of time for a AAA title like Borderlands to be developed in. However, you need to consider that it took them 7 years between Borderlands 2 releasing for Borderlands 3 to actually release, right? So Borderlands 4 could still be another 1 or 2 years off. At the very least, we know that when this particular developer left Lost Boys Interactive in July of 2022, the game was in some sort of active development. So if you take that again at face value, the game has probably been in development for a couple of years now. So I wouldn't be surprised, if we might saw the game actually release next year. And I was looking at the release slate of 2024 so far, and this year has been huge in the games industry. Next year is looking kind of light on. It might be the perfect opportunity for Borderlands 4 to release and just be a huge, huge success, right? All I'm saying though, just consider the length of time between Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3, especially because they developed the pre-sequel in between that. Similarly, with Borderlands 3 to Borderlands 4, they released the first Wonderlands 1 in between that. And that's going to take development time. That's going to take a lot of focus of the studio. Usually, it's like all hands on deck when it comes to even a spin-off title like that. Similar thing happened with Fallout 76. Usually, most of the development studio just goes hands on deck to try and get that title out. And then a lot of the other devs go back to what they were doing, right? So I'm saying Wonderlands 1 might have actually delayed the development of Borderlands 4 just a little bit. So if I was to guess, the safe option I would say is that the game releases in 2025. But if they're making good progress and if everything's going all right, then it could come out next year. However, the problem is things are not going all right. Not necessarily at Gearbox, but at Embracer Group, which is the parent company of Gearbox. So Embracer Group acquired Gearbox for $1.3 billion in 2021, right? And Embracer Group, not Gearbox, Embracer Group is in big trouble. It's well publicized at this stage, but I think it was earlier this year they had a $2 billion deal suddenly fall through with the Saudi government, specifically their Savvy Games Group, which caused shares to plummet in Embracer. It plummeted by like over 40%. It was kind of crazy. And because of that, and because they lost out on all that money and all that capital, it led to Embracer actually announcing that they're going to be doing a huge restructuring program, which is involving aggressive redundancies and cost cutting to try and reduce their debt. Their debt right now is $1.4 billion, and that itself is down by 31% from a year ago. So they have a good bit of debt. That's not a surprise with companies like this. Often they do have debt, but $1.4 billion is a lot. And they've made in Q3 over 900 developers redundant across their group. And they still plan to make more redundancies to try and reduce that debt to $757 million, so about by half. So it's not looking good for a lot of the development studios under Embracer. And because of that, they're looking for more external funding. They've cancelled 15 unannounced projects at Amplifier, Free Mode, Gearbox, and even Gearbox, PlayOn as well, Saber, THQ Nordic. They've cut a bunch of titles, and they said, I think it was mostly unannounced titles, so nothing that we heard of, I think. And now they're focusing on new paths in PC and console development, right? So you have to ask yourself the question, with all these redundancies, with all these projects being cut, is Borderlands 4 and Wonderlands 2 part of that? I think the title that's probably more at risk is probably Wonderlands 2. They might be like, you know what, it could have just been a one-off hit. Let's focus all our eggs on Borderlands 4. And because it's such a huge franchise, as I mentioned, yeah, it's safe to say that Borderlands 4 is probably being developed. However, apparently Embracer, if you missed the news, is considering selling off Gearbox software. So again, the link is in the description below to the source, but apparently Gearbox is looking to be sold off by Embracer, and there was an email obtained where the Gearbox COO Dan Hewitt said the following: the best case is that Gearbox remains a part of Embracer. However, there are many options under consideration, including Gearbox's transfer, taking Gearbox independent, and others. And ultimately, he said, they'll move ahead with whichever path is best for both Gearbox and also Embracer. And apparently, sources have claimed that Gearbox or Embracer has received interest from third parties for the purchase of Gearbox. So, could Gearbox actually be sold off? Could they go independent? This is a big deal. If they were to go independent, yeah, Gearbox has money, right? They got a lot of money from the acquisition. And they obviously have the big franchise that is Borderlands under them. But them being sold off and being made independent can put Borderlands 4 at risk. It's certainly going to put Wonderlands 2 at risk. But we could see Borderlands 4 if either not being developed or being slow, being delayed in their development because of all this acquisition and selling off nonsense that goes on, right? So there is a bit of a risk here that we, again, might see Borderlands 4 a couple of years off. They could be sold off to a company that's like, we don't care about Borderlands 4. We purchased you for your dev studio. We're going to be making a Borderlands mobile game. The future isn't mobile. That's a really bad hypothetical example, but it could happen. Crazier things have happened in the games industry. But the good news is that at the very least, Gearbox is still hiring right now. Even with Embracer having all these issues, even with the potential looming sale or spinning off to go independent, they're still hiring. For instance, they're currently hiring for a senior level designer that has experience in open worlds, Unreal Engine, and FPS level design, and also AAA action games. Kind of sounds like a Borderlands game, right? So yeah, they're probably right now hiring for people to work on Borderlands 4. So And another question actually can actually be asked: could Borderlands 4 go fully open world like Skyrim and other titles, or could they be speaking about another game? Like, there is a chance that could be talking about a completely other game that's an open world game. I would say the chance is probably low. It's such a risky time for Embracer and Gearbox right now. They're probably not going to take their chances and risk on a brand new IP. It's just not a good time to be doing something like that. The safer option is to fall back on something that's reliable, and that, of course, is the Borderlands franchise. And I would assume that if Embracer was to keep Gearbox in the family, they would probably pressure them to make Borderlands 4 because they know it's going to be such a cash cow. So I still think Borderlands 4 is going to happen, whether they stay in Embracer or they become independent or are sold off. At the very least, I would say the title that's probably most at risk is Wonderlands 2. But if Borderlands 4 is a huge success and they can use that code base and use that engine to build off, use the engine, of course they're using Unreal 4, but if they can use the code base to kind of build off of that and make Wonderlands 2, then I think that Wonderlands 2 still has a decent chance if Borderlands 4 actually does come out. So, let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think Borderlands 4 is actually under development? Do you think Wonderlands 2 is actually under development? Do you think that Embracer is going to sell off Gearbox? Are they going to go independent? I would love to hear your thoughts. And until next time, this has been Lone. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.